The paint can hit the floor with a metallic clang, splattering crimson across my hardwood. I froze, heart pounding, as Lucas Kane's blue eyes locked onto mine, sharp and unreadable. He didn't say a word, just knelt to clean the mess, but the air between us crackled with something I couldn't name. I'd hired Lucas 3 days ago to repaint my Brooklyn apartment, a third-floor walk-up I'd turned into a chaotic canvas of my own art. My name's Ezra Caldwell, 28, a painter, not the house kind, the art kind, whose work hung in small galleries but barely paid the rent. My place was a mess of half-finished sketches, spilled coffee, and dreams I couldn't quite pin down. When my landlord threatened to evict me unless I cleaned up the peeling walls, I found Lucas on a local job board. Kane's painting, fast, clean, professional, his ad read. Seemed simple enough. Lucas was not what I expected. 6'2", broad shoulders, with a face that looked carved from stone and dusted with freckles from too many hours in the sun. He showed up in a worn flannel, toolbox in hand, and laid out his rules before I could even offer him coffee. No small talk. No music while I work. And don't touch my tools. His voice was low, steady, like he was used to being obeyed. I nodded, half amused, half intimidated, and figured I'd stay out of his way. But staying out of his way was harder than I thought. My apartment was small, 700 square feet of creaky floors and mismatched furniture, and Lucas's presence filled it like a storm cloud. He worked with precision, taping edges, mixing colors, his hands steady as a surgeon's. I catch myself watching him from my easel, sketching his silhouette without meaning to. The way his jaw tightened when he focused, the way his fingers gripped the roller, it was distracting. I told myself it was just aesthetic appreciation. I'm gay, out since I was 16, and I'd learned to keep my heart locked tight after too many rejections. Lucas, with his gruff demeanor and wedding band tan line, screamed straight. Off limits. That first day, I tried to break the ice. You ever paint anything besides walls? I asked, gesturing to my canvas of swirling blues and golds. He glanced at it, then back at his work. Not my thing, he said, and that was that. I didn't push. His rules, his space. But by day 2, the silence was suffocating. I blast my headphones to fill the void, sketching furiously to keep my mind off him. Then came the paint can incident. Shit, I muttered, lunging to help as the crimson spread. Lucas held up a hand, stopping me cold. Don't, he said, his voice sharp but not angry. He grabbed a rag, wiping the floor with quick, efficient strokes. I stood there, useless, my pulse racing for no good reason. When he stood, our eyes met again, and for a split second, I swore I saw something flicker in his gaze, something raw, unguarded. Then he turned away, back to his work, like nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my lumpy couch, staring at the half-painted walls glowing faintly in the moonlight. Lucas's rules were clear, but they were starting to feel like a challenge. I wasn't supposed to talk, to connect, to cross that line. But every time he looked at me, every time his hand brushed too close while passing a paint roller, I felt the rules bending. I didn't know his story, why he was so closed off, why he worked alone, why his ring finger bore the ghost of a marriage. All I knew was that I wanted to know. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. I brewed coffee, set a mug on the counter near his workspace, and said, "It's for you. No strings." He stared at it like it was a trap, then muttered, "Thanks," and took a sip. Progress, I thought. But when I asked about his life, where he was from, why he painted, he shut down. Rule 1, he said, pointing to his no small talk clause. I grinned, undeterred. Fine, but I'm keeping the coffee coming. By day 4, the apartment was transforming. The walls, once a dull beige, now glowed with a soft sage green Lucas had suggested. It's calming, he'd said, the first time he'd offered an opinion unprompted. I liked it, liked him more than I should. I started leaving little offerings, coffee, a spare sketch pad, a playlist I swore I wasn't playing out loud. He never commented, but he stopped flinching when I got too close. Once, I caught him glancing at my latest painting, a vibrant abstract of two figures tangled in light. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was cleaning brushes in the sink, humming softly, when I turned to find Lucas watching me. Not his usual quick glance, but a long, steady stare. My breath caught. "What?" I asked, half laughing to hide my nerves. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the paint and cedar on him. "You're loud," he said, but there was no bite in his voice. His lips twitched, almost a smile. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to say something clever, to push past his walls, but all I managed was, "You're not so quiet yourself." He didn't move away. For one reckless moment, I thought he might close the gap entirely. But then his phone buzzed, shattering the spell. He stepped back, checked the screen, and his face hardened. "Break's over," he said, and just like that, the moment was gone. I stood there, brushes dripping, wondering what the hell had just happened, and why I cared so much. The paint fumes were getting to me, or maybe it was Lucas. By day 5, the air in my apartment felt thick with more than just the smell of sage green. Every glance, every accidental brush of his arm against mine, was a spark I couldn't ignore. I tried to focus on my own work, but my sketches were all wrong. Too many sharp angles, too much shadow. They looked like him. I caught Lucas watching me again that afternoon. His roller paused mid-stroke. "You're wasting paint," he said, nodding at the crimson I'd spilled earlier, now a faint stain on the floor. I laughed, trying to play it off. "You're one to talk, Mr. Rules." He raised an eyebrow, and I swear it was the closest he'd come to joking. That night, I pushed my luck. I left a sketch on the counter, a quick pencil drawing of him, mid-work, his focus etched in every line. I didn't sign it, didn't say a word. When he found it the next morning, he froze, his fingers tracing the paper like it was fragile. "This is me," he asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. I nodded, my throat tight. "It's good," he said, and slipped it into his toolbox. My heart did a stupid flip. Lucas started loosening up after that. He'd hum under his breath while painting some old country tune I didn't recognize. Once, he even asked about my art. "What's the point of it?" he said, not cruelly, just curious. I told him about color, about feeling, about capturing something true. He listened, really listened, and I felt like I'd won something. But there were cracks in his armor I couldn't ignore. His phone buzzed constantly. Texts he'd read and ignore, calls he'd let go to voicemail. Once I caught a glimpse of a name on the screen, Clara. Ex-wife, I guessed from the tan line on his finger. I didn't ask. Rule 1. But the more he opened up, the more I wanted to know. Where is he from? Why was he here, painting apartments in Brooklyn instead of somewhere else? And why did his eyes linger on me when he thought I wasn't looking? By day 6, the apartment was nearly done. The walls glowed, the space felt new, and I hated how much I didn't want him to leave. I started finding excuses to keep him around, asking him to touch up corners, to check the trim. He didn't call me out, but I caught a knowing look in his eyes. "You're stalling," he said once, wiping sweat from his brow. I shrugged, grinning. Maybe I liked the company. That evening, everything shifted. I was mixing paints for my own work, and Lucas was cleaning his rollers in the sink. The silence was comfortable now, almost intimate. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe the way the light hit his face, maybe the way he'd started to feel like part of the space, but I said, "You ever think about breaking your own rules?" He turned, slowly, his hand still wet. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, but his voice was low, careful. I stepped closer, reckless. "You know what I mean." My heart was a drum in my chest. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I thought he'd bolt. But he didn't. He just stood there, inches away, and the air felt like it could ignite. Then his phone buzzed again, Clara's name flashing, and he flinched like he'd been slapped. He grabbed his toolbox and muttered, "I gotta go." The door slammed behind him. I stood there, alone, the half-painted wall mocking me. What was I doing? Lucas was straight, or at least he acted like it. He had rules, a past, a life I knew nothing about. But the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd kept that sketch, wasn't nothing. I sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, and wondered if I just ruined everything. The next morning, Lucas showed up late, his eyes shadowed like he hadn't slept. The easy rhythm we'd built was gone, replaced by a tension that made my skin itch. I wanted to ask about last night, about Clara, about why he'd run, but his rules loomed like a wall between us. He painted in silence, his movements sharp, mechanical. I tried to focus on my own canvas, but every stroke felt forced. By noon, I couldn't take it. "You okay?" I asked, breaking rule 1. He didn't look up. "Fine," he said, the word clipped. I should have let it go, but I didn't. "You don't seem fine." His roller stopped, and he turned, his jaw tight. "You don't know me, Isra." That stung, but it also lit a fire. "Then tell me," I said, stepping closer. "Who's Clara? Why do you shut down every time I get close?" His eyes flashed, anger, maybe fear, and for a second I thought he'd walk out again. But he didn't. He set the roller down, slow, deliberate, and said, "Clara's my ex. We split a year ago. That's all you get." It wasn't much, but it was something. I nodded, backing off, and we worked in silence for the rest of the day. But the air felt different now, like a door had cracked open. That night, he stayed later than usual, touching up the trim in the living room. I offered him a beer, half expecting him to say no. He took it, sat on the couch, and for the first time we talked. Not about Clara, not about us, but about small things, Brooklyn, the Mets, the way the city never slept. It was normal, and it wasn't, because every word felt like a step towards something bigger. By day 8, the apartment was done. The walls were perfect, the sage green glowing like a promise. Lucas packed his tools, his movements slow, like he was stalling too. I didn't want him to go. I didn't know how to say it. So I did something stupid. I handed him another sketch, this one bolder, 2 figures in a swirl of color, their hands almost touching. "For you," I said, my voice barely steady. He looked at it, then at me, and I saw it again, that flicker in his eyes, raw and unguarded. "Your trouble," he said, but there was no edge to it. He folded the sketch, tucked it into his pocket, and left without another word. I stood in my perfect apartment, feeling anything but. I didn't know his story, not really, but I knew I was falling for him, and that scared the hell out of me. The next day, he didn't show up. No call, no text. I tried to paint, but my hand shook. I kept checking my phone, hoping for something, anything. By evening, I was a wreck, pacing the apartment, replaying every moment. Had I pushed too far? Was he gone for good? Then, at 9 p.m., a knock. I opened the door, and there he was, toolbox in hand, his flannel rumpled like he'd been wrestling with something all day. "I forgot a brush," he said, but his eyes said something else. He stepped inside, and before I could speak, he set the toolbox down and turned to me. "I'm not good at this," he said, his voice rough. "At talking. At feeling shit I'm not supposed to feel." My heart stopped. "What are you feeling?" I asked, barely a whisper. He didn't answer, just stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Then he kissed me. It was sudden, fierce, like he'd been holding it back for days. His hands cupped my face, paint-stained and strong, and I kissed him back, pouring every unspoken word into it. When we broke apart, his eyes were wide, like he'd surprised himself. "I'm not," he started, then stopped. "I don't know what I am." I touched his arm, gentle. "You don't have to know. Not yet." The kiss lingered in the air like paint fumes, heady and dangerous. Lucas didn't leave that night, not right away. We sat on the couch, beers forgotten, the silence between us heavy with what we'd done. His hands fidgeted, like he was trying to ground himself. "I've never," he started, then shook his head. "Not with a guy." I nodded, giving him space. My heart was still racing, but I didn't push. "You don't owe me an explanation," I said. He looked at me, his blue eyes stormy. "Yeah, I do. You're in my head, Ezra. All the time." Those words hit harder than the kiss. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him back into that moment, but I could see the war in his eyes. He was fighting something, himself, his past, maybe both. He told me about Clara, piece by piece. They'd been high school sweethearts, married young, back in Ohio. She wanted stability, he wanted freedom. The divorce was messy, left him broke and drifting. Painting was just a job to keep him afloat. I thought I had it all figured out, he said, staring at the floor. Then I met you. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened, letting him unravel. We didn't kiss again that night. He left around midnight, promising to come back to check the trim. I didn't believe it, but I hoped. The next day, he showed up with coffee, 2 cups, one for me. It was small, but it felt huge. We worked side by side, me and my easel, him touching up non-existent flaws. The rules were gone now, replaced by something fragile and new. But nothing was simple. Lucas was skittish, pulling back every time we got too close. One day, he'd laugh, share a story about sneaking into a concert as a kid. The next, he'd barely speak, his phone buzzing with Clara's name. I try not to care, but it ate at me. Was he still tied to her? Was I just a deeder? I threw myself into my art, painting bolder, darker, every stroke a question I couldn't ask. One afternoon, I caught him staring at my latest piece, a chaotic swirl of reds and blues, 2 figures caught in a storm. "That's us, isn't it?" he said, his voice quiet. I froze. Maybe, I admitted. He stepped closer, his shoulder brushing mine. "It's messy," he said, "but it's beautiful." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him he was beautiful, that this, us, was worth a mess. But before I could, his phone rang. Clara again. He answered this time, stepping outside, his voice low and tense. When he came back, he looked wrecked. "She wants to meet," he said. "Says she's in town." My stomach dropped. "You gonna go?" I asked, trying to sound neutral. He didn't answer, just grabbed his toolbox and left. I spent the night painting, furious, scared, pouring every fear onto the canvas. What if he went back to her? What if this was all a mistake? He didn't show up the next day, or the next. I called, texted, got nothing. By day 3, I was a mess, snapping at my gallery contact, spilling paint like a rookie. My apartment, once alive with his presence, felt empty, the sage green walls mocking me. I hated how much I missed him, how much I'd let myself hope. Then, on the 4th day, a knock. Lucas, unshaven, eyes red. "I saw her," he said before I could speak. "Clara, it's over. For good." I waited, heart in my throat. "I told her about you," he said, his voice breaking. "I told her I'm not the guy she married. I don't know what I am, but I want to find out. With you." Lucas's words hung in the air, raw and unsteady, like a brushstroke that could ruin or redeem a canvas. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He stepped inside, closing the door, his hands shaking. "It means I'm scared as hell, Ezra, but I'm here." We talked for hours that night, sprawled on the couch, the city humming outside. He told me about growing up in a small town where different was an option. He'd buried parts of himself, married Clara to fit the mold, but it never felt right. Meeting me, he said, was like waking up. "You make me question everything," he said, his eyes locked on mine. I wanted to kiss him, but I held back. This was too big, too fragile. The next week was a dance of hope and hesitation. Lucas came over every day, not to paint walls, but to be with me. We'd cook terrible meals, laugh at my burnt attempts at pancakes, and talk about everything: art, music, the way the Brooklyn skyline looked at dusk. He was still guarded, still figuring himself out, but he was trying. And every time he smiled, it felt like a victory. But the world wasn't as kind as my apartment. We went for coffee one morning, and I reached for his hand without thinking. He pulled back, eyes darting to the barista, the other customers. "Not here," he whispered. It stung, but I got it. He wasn't ready. I told myself to be patient, but patience wasn't my strength. I've been out for years, fought my battles, taken my scars. Lucas was just starting. One night, he showed up with a small canvas, his first attempt at painting something real. It was rough, clumsy lines, uneven colors, but it was him, a field under a stormy sky. "It's how I feel," he said, shy. All mixed up but alive. I wanted to cry. Instead, I hugged him, fierce and fast, and he hugged me back. It was the first time he'd initiated touch, and it felt like a promise. But promises break. A week later, we were at a bar, celebrating my first gallery show in months. I was buzzing, high on cheap wine, and Lucas's arm around my shoulder. Then a guy from his old life recognized him. Some friend of Clara's, loud and drunk. "Didn't know you swung that way, Kane," he sneered, eyeing me. Lucas froze, his arm dropping. I waited for him to say something, to stand up for us, but he just stared at the floor. The guy laughed and walked away, but the damage was done. We left in silence. Back at my place, I couldn't hold it in. "You ashamed of me?" I asked, my voice shaking. He flinched. "It's not that. It's I don't know how to do this, Ezra. I'm trying." I wanted to scream, to tell him trying wasn't enough, but I saw the panic in his eyes. He was drowning in his own head. "I need time," he said, and left. I didn't sleep that night. I painted instead a brutal canvas of blacks and reds, all jagged edges. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't. He was fighting a war I'd fought years ago, and I knew how much it hurt. But knowing didn't make it easier. The gallery show was a blur. My paintings sold, more than I expected, but the victory felt hollow without Lucas. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, and I was too stubborn to reach out. I told myself it was over, that I'd been stupid to hope. But every time I passed the sage green walls, I saw him. A week later, I was cleaning my brushes when my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Can we talk?" My heart leapt, then sank. I didn't know if I could handle another round of his push and pull. But I texted back, "My place. Tonight." When he showed up, he looked different, steadier, like he'd made a decision. He held a small package, wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a painting, his painting, a better version of the stormy field. Now, with two figures standing together, hands linked. "I'm done running," he said. "I told my family. About me. About us." I stared at him, stunned. "They didn't take it well," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I don't care. I want this. I want you." I didn't know what to say, so I kissed him. It was slow this time, certain like we were both sure. When we pulled back, he was smiling, really smiling for the first time. "I'm still a mess," he said. "But I'm your mess if you'll have me." I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. "Deal." The next month was hard but good. Lucas was still learning, still tripping over his own fears, but he showed up. He held my hand in public, hesitant at first, then proud. We painted together, his clumsy strokes next to my wild ones, and it felt like we were building something real. He told me about his family's rejection, the friends he'd lost, but also the ones who stayed. I told him about my own battles, the years of hiding, the freedom I'd found. We were different, but we fit. One night, we sat on my roof, the Brooklyn skyline glittering below. "I never thought I'd get here," he said, his hand in mine. "Me neither," I admitted. We didn't need to say more. The city hummed, the stars blinked, and for once, the world felt big enough for both of us. Life with Lucas wasn't perfect, but it was ours. We fought about his stubbornness, my impatience, but we always came back to each other. My apartment, once a chaotic mess, was now a home, filled with our paintings, our laughter, our love. The sage green walls held our story, every stroke a memory. One evening, months later, we were at a new gallery show, my biggest yet. Lucas stood beside me, his arm around my waist, no hesitation. A critic asked about my inspiration, and I looked at him. "It's about finding someone who sees you," I said, "and choosing to see them back." Lucas squeezed my hand, his eyes shining. We weren't just a story of paint and rules anymore. We were a story of courage, of breaking molds, of choosing love over fear. Lucas had come out to the world, and I'd learned to trust again. Together, we were painting something new, not just walls, but a life. As we left the gallery, the city alive around us, Lucas pulled me close. "You changed everything," he whispered. I smiled, my heart full. "You did too." And in that moment, under the Brooklyn stars, I knew we'd keep painting together no matter what came next.